housing? Out of curiosity. Okay. Any other just brief insights? Okay. We are hoping. Oh, sorry.
Everybody loves the city.
Everybody.
Well, and the seawall especially is what we're talking about. How beautiful it is to run on the seawall.
Seawall. Seawall is very beautiful. I would agree. Sorry.
There are very few very young people. There are young people in their 20s and 30s, but like my neighbor, not very many families are able to live in the West End.
Okay, so not very
That's a
many.
housing issue, I would think.
Not very many families. Something Cherie can speak to from a school board perspective. So I think we've learned something about you. We wanted to be able to tell you something about the work that we've been doing and then do some questions and answers directly with the panelists. So I'm going to start by introducing the panelists. I asked the panelists the same questions I just asked you before we got on stage. I'm not going to give you all their answers, but some brief snippets. Gregor Robertson lived in the West End. Well, his dad lived in the West End when he was a kid, so he had the opportunity to spend weekends, holidays, and probably the occasional skipping school day in the West End. He is an owner, and he has not moved in the last 2 years. Not surprisingly, he did bike here tonight. I was trying to get him to drive just so we could answer this question differently. And his favorite public space in the West End is all the mini parks you have where the streets are closed off and you've got these great sort of parklets and public spaces. Next up, we have Tim Stevenson, elected to council in 2002. He was the first openly gay MLA in British Columbia, and also the first openly gay minister and cabinet minister in Canada. The cabinet minister. So Tim has rented in the same apartment for 16 years in the West End. He drove here for a variety of reasons, I'm sure he'll explain. He left his bike at home, and his favorite public space is the seawall. Then we've got Cherie Payne, who was elected in 2011 to the Vancouver School Board. She was the first member of her family to go to university. I chose this fact to tell you about her because I just think it's such an amazing thing to speak to the power of education and how important that can be in families. She is an owner. She has not moved in the last 2 years. She walked here, and her favorite public space in the West End is Barclay Heritage Square. Next up, we've got Aaron Jasper. Aaron was elected in 2008 to Park Board, former chair of the Park Board. He is also a former WIRA director and the current chair of Save St. Paul's Hospital Coalition. He is a renter, hasn't moved in the last 2 years, although he has changed from owner to renter, which is a very interesting and unusual story. He walked here tonight, and his favorite public space in the West End is English Bay. You have to tell us a bit about the noise. How that. Trevor Loeb, who's the last member of our panel, was elected in 2011 to Park Board. He is the youngest person to ever be elected to civic office in Vancouver. He plays hockey and is a goalkeeper, which is funny because I play soccer and I'm a goalkeeper. So somehow we have 2 goalies and a striker on stage today. He is a renter. He moved once in the last 2 years. He walked here, and his favorite public space is Malcolm Bowl. Favorite public space in the West End is Malcolm Bowl. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gregor Robertson to talk about what's been happening at council.
Thank you, Andrea, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here and dedicating some of your time to talk politics and government and to get to know each other a little bit more. It's so multi-purpose night to talk about where we're at as a city, where we're at here in the West End, particularly in the neighborhood. I'll just do a quick run through on our focus at council right now and the work that I've been doing as mayor. Affordable housing has been top priority for this year. It's almost a year since the last election, and affordable housing has been the focus. We've had a task force work through 9 months since the beginning of this year and bring a report forward to council and taking next steps, making recommendations to council. Council and staff worked on next steps, basically at a number of steps we can take to get affordable housing being built throughout the city, because the market is not delivering it at anywhere near what the need is. So we've we've got a strategy to leverage city assets. The city owns tons of land and buildings. We need to use those assets a lot better and leverage more housing, more affordable housing on those sites. We have a game plan to look at neighborhood centers and transit arterials throughout the city to be adding some more density of affordable housing specifically. So we'll be accepting 20 proposals for going up to 6 stories in neighborhood centers. The main streets, like Main Street, for example, the main arterials, if it's affordable housing, it has to be affordable, 20% below market if it's for sale, or it has to be rental housing. And people will see what happens getting more density in the neighborhood centers close to transit. That's affordable. And then there are a number of other ideas, basically creating an affordable housing authority at the city that can basically be a nimble arm of the city to focus purely on affordable housing and getting it built. Because the city, most of our focus is police and fire and streets and garbage and all the things that make the city tick. And there isn't really enough bandwidth within the city as an organization to focus solely on affordable housing and put the partnerships together to make it happen. So we'll have a more aggressive body to do that work specifically in the years ahead. That work is all rolling out now as quickly as we can, because it takes years to get the housing built. We know we need a lot more housing, particularly for seniors and for younger people, young families, students. That's where the real pinch is being felt around the city. So we'll be focused on getting projects going as quickly as we can, getting new flow of affordable housing happening throughout the city. So that's the housing piece. Homelessness obviously remains a top goal, making sure people can get off the streets. We did just get a partnership confirmed with the province, 160 more shelter beds for this winter, and 100 units of what we call interim housing that is a little more stable for the next couple of years while we get permanent housing built. So that's 260 more beds that people can rely on this winter. Trying to make sure we can get almost everyone off the streets. Anyone who wants to get off the streets in the winter, and hopefully that's everyone, we have the room inside. It's been a challenge. This is the 5th winter now that we've been working with the province to try and get enough. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. Last winter we did not have enough, and we actually, after several years of the street homeless population going down dramatically, an 80% drop in the number of street homeless from 2008, it went back up last winter because we didn't have enough shelter beds open with the province. And this year they've come to the table earlier. It's nice to have an election year. It's motivating some of that action. So we've got more opening up, and ultimately we have to build a permanent housing. So we're very focused on that, the supportive and social housing for people who have none right now. Transportation, I'll just touch on briefly. We just had the Transportation 2040 plan approved at council. It's been going on for a couple of years of consultation. About 18,000 people gave input to it. It's looking at the city over the next 30 or so years and planning out how forms of transportation continue to function when 150,000 more people move to Vancouver, which is roughly what we expect. And really being able to, we can't add more cars to the road. We have a limited road base. If we add more cars, there's more traffic. So it's maintaining or slightly reducing the car traffic and basically servicing all the additional transportation needs with more transit, bicycles, and walking, and how we do that with each of those forms. So transit is the big one. That's where most people shift to. The Broadway line is where our big focus has got to be for the next few years, making sure we get people east-west as far out as UBC. That's the busiest transit bus corridor in North America right now. It's about the same ridership as the Canada line on the B line. So we need rapid transit there. Again, it's the BC government and the federal government have to come to the table. TransLink, we have to fix how TransLink is funded. So there's a lot of steps, but we're trying to move all that as aggressively as we can. So those are big, in terms of housing and transportation, big pieces that we're doing. In the West End, on the transportation front, some of you may have been involved in the Comox-Helmcken Greenway work, the first phase of consultation, looking at from Stanley Park to Hornby is the first piece of that, and making it a safer route for biking and walking. making it a greenway. This has been at least 10 years of being talked about, being on the books, various meetings. It's stepped up now because we want to make sure we get a route through the city from Falls Creek to Stanley Park, and a safer way for walkers and bikers to get through the city and connect to the Hornby bike lane, to go that direction. It's connecting the dots, the schools, the community centers, right through the downtown on that axis. So that's a piece of work on transportation. I'd say more broadly, obviously development is a big issue for us. Most of what we deal with in terms of growth and development is responding to private landowners who want to build bigger, build more, create more housing, create more commercial space. Right now we have a huge push on commercial space downtown. We have 6 new office tower projects that are working their way through the process after many years of not having any. So a real influx of investment and confidence in Vancouver's economy, which is good to see. And on the housing side, lots of big projects. The latest one, the Oak Ridge, a giant proposal that's coming forward on Oak Ridge, basically creating a small city at 41st and Cambie. A lot of development is focused in the Cambie corridor along the Canada Line. And again, all of it, with the Canada Line, it's responding to billions of dollars of infrastructure that was put in place, which we need to have housing adjacent to. The rest of the city, it's really wherever people, landowners, developers come forward and say we want something to change here, and our job is to go through that process with our staff and see what makes sense and work with the community on it. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot more on that front. On the renter side, I just want to talk about a couple things that we've had come through. One that we've got going now is the rent bank, to help people, particularly who are vulnerable in terms of homelessness. So they need to survive within their place. There's now a rent bank in Vancouver, which is a big step, a big safety net that has worked in a number of other cities. We had lots of people come forward to help fund this. Private donors came forward, and we're lucky to have that in place now. So if you need more information on that, that's definitely available. The other piece is the rental building registry, which is something we've asked city staff to put together over this past year, and that's basically a registry of all of the rental buildings in the city, so people can look, get information, what conditions the building in, how's it going, are people happy there? So there's an open source of information. A few other cities have done this. New York has it. They use it more as the evil landlord registry or something like that. Something like that. The bad landlord thing. We're trying to keep it more neutral and just present all the information, but to give renters who are more than half of the city and more than 80% in the West End that access to information. Who owns the buildings, and are they violating any of the rules at City Hall? All that information will be available. That's coming very soon. It's in the final stages. So that's a couple pieces on the rental housing front that we have been working on and are almost finished. And I will maybe ask Tim, my colleague on City Council, to add a few tidbits.
Thanks, Gregor. First of all, thanks for coming out in such large numbers. This is wonderful. I think it's the first time I've been in one of these town hall meetings where we've had quite this many people and interested in so many different issues. But I just want to say, I don't know about you folks, but I feel a great sense of relief after last night's election. Anybody else feel that? I've been in really bad shape for the last 2 weeks thinking, oh, it can't be happening, it can't be, and boom, just the way we wanted it. The two issues that Gregor touched on at the end here have been ones that have been really important for us in the West End. The rent bank is really very important for people who haven't got money to afford to go into a rental unit, and now they'll be able to get a helping hand. And the other one is that registry, so that we can all look up online and find out exactly who owns the building, what some of the problems have been, what state it's in, and so on. And it will be a big, big help, because often those of us who are renters, we're absolutely blind when we go and try and rent a place. And obviously the people that own it can say no to us, and they may say no to us for whatever reason, but we don't know whether to say no or yes to them. And this is going to give us really a leg up. So I'm really appreciative that we are able to get that through. On the LGBTQ area, we do have an advisory group now of members, and we have a very vibrant group. And Dean Malone, who's here tonight, is now one of the co-chairs from the West End. And they're advising council on issues like affordability for our community, for the GLBTQ community, on safety, on housing, and actually on Davie Street. We're really having a look at Davie Street to see how we can keep that a village. It's been known as the GLBTQ village for a long time, and many people feel that's been slipping a bit. So we're going to have a concentrated look on that, both with the committee and the planning department. So those of you who are interested in that, please get involved, because it really is important. Another area that's of a huge concern to so many of us is the lack of variety of businesses on Denman Street. It's like a lot of restaurants and not many meat shops or vegetable shops or fish shops or any other kind of shops that my grandmother, who lived here 50 years ago, used to enjoy and just walk down Denman. And I think we really need to change the whole ethos of that street. I'd love to have I'd love to see that go down to 3 lanes, and I know North and West Vancouver love to come down through Denman Street, but they don't shop, they don't do anything in the West End except drive on through. So we want to figure out a way that maybe we can widen those sidewalks and get more tables on the sidewalk and make that really kind of a European style street. So that's a couple of things that we're looking at as well.
Thank you, Gregor. And Tim, we're going to have Aaron and Trevor speak about what's happening at the park board.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see so many friends and neighbors in the audience. Where to start park board? I thought Trevor and I talked about trying to keep it really focused on our neighborhood in the West End. One of the projects, of course, we finished last year was the seawall improvements. During the tough economic time, we actually worked quite successfully with our mayor in securing federal infrastructure money. And a lot of that went to improvements in our neighborhood. The 2 sections of the seawall, I'm sure if you've all had a chance to go down there and enjoy it, quite an improvement. We also made improvements to the Malkin Bowl in Stanley Park, the stage area, and not quite in the West End, but down the Roundhouse. We made some great improvements down at the Round Table area. Some of the initiatives that we're working on currently at the park board, one is making substantive improvements to our dog off leash policy and the whole issue around dog off leash, better enforcement, better rules, and evaluating where our off leash areas. Obviously, it's I know it's probably an email a day probably we get about dog off leash issues. Another area that we are working on, we just actually passed the Stanley Park cycling plan, and really the main thrust of that was to try and improve pedestrian and cycling safety, not just on the seawall portions, but through the entire park. So over the coming years, we're hoping to implement some strategies. Dovetailing into that, we also approved a motion in the summertime to improve safety on the seawall. So starting right from the convention center, Cole Harbor, English Bay, all the way through down past Kids Beach. So we want to take some of the lessons that we've learned from the Stanley Park cycling plan and see if we can make some improvements, make it safer for everybody. So whether you're cycling, rollerblading with a stroller, just going for a walk, we think that the safety on that seawall is very important. A couple of the things that I'm very proud of, actually, our Vision Caucus supported this summer. We voted to oppose the Kinder Morgan expansion into Burrard Inlet to increase oil tanker traffic. And sort of ties into that, we also came out very, very loudly opposed to the closure of the Coast Guard station in Kids Point. And my colleague Constance Barnes has been sort of taking point for us, but I think it's a no-brainer thing for all of us in this room, the importance of protecting our beaches and foreshore. Looking forward, there are some exciting projects coming up. We also just passed the Urban Forest Management Plan, and we are looking forward to being able to work with neighborhoods across the city and how we protect and enhance our urban forests, not just for us today, but for future generations. So it's something that we hope to engage with all neighborhoods, including ours here in the West End. We're also looking at engaging people. We actually just formed a task force called the Local Food Assets Task Force, and myself and Commissioner Nikki Sharma are co-chairing that, and that's looking for opportunities in all the neighborhoods across Vancouver. How do we enhance urban agriculture? How do we enhance more community gardens, perhaps community kitchens that are tied in with our community centers? And so stay tuned. I think there'll be a lot of exciting initiatives that come out of that. The one last thing I do want to touch on, though, is we are also working very closely with our Community Center Association partners. One of the things that we're trying to do is find more standardization in prices, all the programming in our community centers across the city. We're also working with our partners to make sure that those flexi passes that you have would be honored across the city at every single community center. So some initiatives in our community centers, which I think you'll notice as users, better pricing, I think a better equitable arrangement for those of you who are on fixed or low income, and being able to take that pass, just like a library card, and being able to use that card at every single community center across the city. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thanks, Aaron. You basically covered everything. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to try to keep it to about 20 minutes or so. The first thing I want to do is a little bit of trivia. How many people think we have about 20 parks in the city of Vancouver? How many people think we've got about 50? 100? How many people think we have 200 parks? Well, you're right, we do. We have 200 parks that are under the jurisdiction of the Park Board. In fact, because of the Board of Parks and Recreation, we also have 24 community centers, pools, and rinks that are under our jurisdiction. And it's our team of 5 Vision Vancouver colleagues and 2 from the NPA that we work with to govern all of these associations, all of the community centers, the pools, the rinks, the parks that we cherish. Many of these parks being the pocket parks that we love so much in the West End. I want to just talk a little bit about the work that the individual commissioners are doing. Nikki Sharma, making sure that we're following through on our Greenest City goals to be the Greenest City on Earth by 2020. Commissioner Constance Barr is working to fight for affordability for families at the community centers and childcare, of course. And Erin is fighting so hard on food security. And my big concern is making sure that citizens, youth, and sports teams are engaged in the work that we do. So thank you all very much for coming up.
No, I am live. Okay, last but not least, we're going to have Cherie Payne from School Board. And when she's done, we're moving to question and answer. So this is my plug for all you tweeters out there. Vision Town Hall is the hashtag, and Bob's going to give me some questions from Twitter when we get going. Okay, Cherie.
My own? Yep, good. Right, so I'm Cherie Payne. I'm a trustee with the Vancouver School Board, and I was elected for the first time last year. So I'm probably new to some of you, and I wanted to take a couple of seconds to explain why it is that I live in the West End and why this neighborhood is so important to me. Actually, when my parents were pregnant with me, they lived on Barclay Street, just down from Friends for Life. And so really this is a return home for me. I spent 13 years living in Ontario and Quebec, and when I decided to come home in 2009, I deliberately chose the West End, not just because I miss the ocean, but also for the green space, for the trees on the streets, for the Stanley Park as an extra bonus. And equally important was that I wanted to live near a very large queer community. I think that people who have grown up in or come of age as members of a cultural minority tend to see the world a little bit differently, mainly because we're treated a little bit differently. And so it was important for me to be near a queer community so that I could be around people who have that kind of shared perspective and that shared experience. At the same time, obviously it's good to learn from others, and one of the advantages of the West End is that it's very diverse in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of country of origin, ESL students, and so this was a neighborhood that I was particularly keen to invest in. As Andrea noted, I am an owner, and I'm also a landlord. I have tenants who rent from me. I charge just below market rates. And so the West End was also important to me because it has a huge rental community. And when you put all of your life savings into one neighborhood, you want to have some sense that there are people who are eager to live there, people who put down roots and stay for a long time. I was glad that you raised the issue about families in the neighborhood. Actually, we have about 1,000 kids that attend schools in the West End proper. But one of the advantages of being part of a partisan organization, being part of Vision Vancouver, is that we are able to coordinate again through all 3 levels of municipal government. So the issue of families is an important one from a school board perspective, but also in terms of housing development. Will we have apartments that have 2 and 3 bedrooms so that more families can move in? What we see is that there's growing demand for schools in Yaletown and International Village, and demand is maybe a little bit stable here in the West End. So these are the kinds of concerns that you can tackle at school, at park, and at city council when you belong to one political party. Another example of that is with the secondary school just on Barclay Street, King George. We were able to partner not just across party lines, but also with local community organizations. So King George worked with the West End Residents Association, with Gordon Neighborhood House, with the YMCA, and with a cycling organization called Pedal to start a new community program called Bike Community. And what it does is it brings together students and recent immigrants to learn concrete skills, bike repair, but also to talk about things like sustainability and healthy living. So these kinds of partnerships across city lines, across the 3 levels of municipal government, and are also working with local community groups are the kinds of things that are really important to us at the VSB. Probably you all know about the attack on the VSB's anti-homophobia policy that took place at the beginning of this year. We at the VSB have had a very strong anti-homophobia policy since 2004, and during the election our opponents at the NPA challenged it. They questioned whether it was necessary. They in fact engaged in a lot of fear-mongering in a lot of different communities to suggest that having an anti-homophobia policy was a bad idea. We at Vision stood up strongly for the policy. We defended it and took a formal action to censure our opponents for doing that type of fear-mongering and spreading misinformation. If any of you were at the meeting at the VSB where the issue was discussed, the level of vitriol was shocking. The hate was thick and palpable. It brought a lot of people to tears. And I think that the main thing I took away from that meeting is that there's still work to be done. That having an anti-homophobia policy is so key because we need to engage in education for the next generation, but we also need to create queer-friendly spaces in our schools for staff and for students so that we can end the cycle of this type of hate going forward. And so I'll just conclude by saying that together with Councillor Stevenson and Trevor Look on the park board, we, all 3 of us, sit on the city's LGBTQ Queer Advisory Committee that is chaired by Dean Malone. And one of the issues that we're looking at moving forward with is issues around trans policy. So looking at facilities in parks and in schools across the city in terms of washrooms, change rooms, these kinds of issues. But also at the school board, we increased funding for diversity trainers so that we can provide support to educators and work not just to stop homophobia, but also to go one step further and to create an actual queer-friendly environment within local schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know from a front row seat how much work these guys all do, and I'm very impressed that you were able to summarize so effectively into the time that was available. So now it is over to all of you. I think what I'm going to do is point out Roberta, who's at the back with the microphone, and then we've got Tori, who's here with the microphone, and if you wave your hand just like you're doing there, good, thank you for doing that, then she will come over with the microphone.
Thank you very much for doing this evening.
Sorry, I should have mentioned this. It'd be helpful for us, for everyone here to know, are you a West End resident? And then to move into the questions.
Just got to get to it.
Yeah, okay, yes. Great, sorry.
Thank you very much for coming this evening and for hosting this event. As some of you may know, most of us are here, have been dying for you to come and do this because we've been trying to talk to you. My name is Jenny Richards, and I have lived in the West End for 37 years.